DougLloyd.com. I'm going to show how to assemble a panorama in Adobe Photoshop. Most people think of panoramas as a wide view, but you can have a panorama that's actually a multi-row. So you see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 shots here, and the goal is to produce a higher total resolution in a squarish format that I couldn't otherwise cover. The first step you want to do is process the files, and I strongly recommend using enhanced details. I'm not going to do that here because it takes time. Use denoise 10 and enhance raw details. Do not use super resolution. So we're going to operate directly here, and you'll want to shoot all frames with manual exposure, otherwise you're going to get very uneven results. And even though I've done that, you'll see it's f6.4 at a 200th of a second for all 4 frames. You can see that there's this kind of odd, if you look at the right, the brightness there doesn't really look the same as on the next shot, even though exposure is identical. And no polarizer is used here, so I don't know what's going on. Maybe there's some internal lens flare or something. Anyway, make sure those exposures are identical or at least close to it, and the best way to do that is use manual exposure. Do not use auto exposure. You'll get varying exposures. Also, do not use auto white balance if you're going to shoot JPEG. I don't recommend JPEG, but you can make panels out of it, of course. Do not use auto white balance. Set it to sunny or whatever the appropriate white balance is, because you want everything to match up across frames. So don't configure your camera to do like auto this and auto that, or you're going to get frames that vary, and that'll create various problems with assembly. All right, so the first thing you do is, of course, decide how you want to process the image. I'm not going to go through that here. That's the subject of another video. I've already prepared that. I've selected all 4. Command A will do that, and I'm going to open them. Okay, they're now open. I'm going to use a script to stack them, but you may have to do this manually by dragging each of them into the same window. And when you've done that, you will see 4 layers. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are our 4 pieces of our panorama. So you're going to make sure they're all visible, select all 4 layers, then go to Edit, Auto Align Layers. And what I like to do is always use reposition, because these other modes, they generally produce results that just aren't very good, in my opinion. Repositioning will be not a perfect match, but let's start with that. And the reason for that is when you actually merge these things, Photoshop is really smart about how it merges them. So it doesn't matter to match if they don't actually match up directly. You can see, for example, these top 2. There's a pretty big shift in position. You can see that cliff move. There shouldn't be. I must have gotten my nodal point, so to speak, wrong. Maybe I even shot it handheld. I forget. Anyway, they're basically sort of roughly aligned. You can see there's a difference in brightness. To me, that suggests the lens itself had flare problems, and there's not a whole lot I can do about that. I shaded the lens, but still. Anyway, we've now aligned them, and now we'll say auto blend layers. And typically, you'll do panorama. Seamless tones and colors is important. Content aware fill. I'm not going to do that here. It takes extra time because it can't fill in this missing mountain worth a darn. So I'm just going to crop it off anyway. So I'm going to click OK. And this is not the fat. Doesn't matter how many cores you have on your CPU here. It pretty much runs on 1 core, so it's not the fastest thing around, but it's reasonably fast. All right, and there we have it. We see we have a assembled panorama. Now that's not all there is to it. Let's just crop off some of this excess here. What you want to do is you can delay the cropping to later, but I want to just get rid of it here. So your first question after you've done this assembly is, do I have a good join? And in this case, I know I did because I've examined it, but here's what I would do. I would start more or less at the left, and you can see over here on this left side there's a problem, so we're going to probably want to crop that off. And what you're looking for is you'll scroll across, and if you use, let's see, it's Command Page Down. Yeah, Command Page Down will scroll you right. You can, of course, just scroll some other means, but command key shortcuts are handy. So Command Page Up will go left. So take a look across the image this way. Okay, I'm going to page down, and then I'm going to page right. And what I'm looking for is places where things that should go together do not go together. Like if this rock face here suddenly had some discontinuity. Sometimes you'll see it on the tops of mountain ranges, stuff like that. So I go through the image and I just go across it like this. Scroll any way you prefer, just to see if there's, yeah, I guess that looks okay. I'm just looking for any bad, what I call bad joins, where it couldn't join it properly. The most likely place to get that is up where you're joining two frames together, such as in this area here, where the frames overlapped somewhere in this area. And I've seen that more than once. And sometimes it just ruins a panorama. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. So in this case, it looks like we're good. So at this point, you've got Photoshop has applied masks and so on. And what I'm now going to do is just flatten these out layer by layer, or you can go to Edit, Flatten Image. Well, it's Image. Where is it? Edit, Flatten All Layers. Well, anyway, I just use Command E. I go Bank, Apply, Blink. It's Command E will flatten a layer in another. So now I've got, all right, so I've squashed those all out. I've got one image. If we look at the size, instead of 12 megapixel, we've got 16642 times, what is that, 12208. It's a 203 megapixel image from a 100 megapixel camera. And so I've doubled the number of pixels. I guess I still have to crop a little bit off, but also what I've also got is this squarish aspect ratio. Well, I guess it turned out about the same. But basically, sometimes you can kind of get an aspect ratio you might want, very wide or more squarish or something else. So I've not only doubled the number of pixels, I have changed the aspect ratio. And you might have just not had a lens that can do this. Furthermore, I shot this with a 55 millimeter, and a 55 millimeter lens has a certain field of view that may be more suitable for a subject. For example, in other words, if I shot this with a 23 millimeter lens, what would happen with a 23 is instead of getting this sort of what I'll call a long lens medium format look, it's going to emphasize the size of closer things. So I would have gotten bigger foreground, anything closer down here. These peaks would be smaller and farther away. Essentially, the small things diminish in size. Close things are much larger, relatively speaking. So by using a 55 and shooting 4 frames, I got sort of a normal lens field of view without the stretching effects and distorted sort of look you can get from a wide angle and exaggerated perspective. I didn't want that here. If I had had maybe an 85 or a 105 or 110 rather, then I could have shot more frames, gotten even more resolution, and gotten even a longer look. I didn't necessarily want, for example, this slice down here. It's fine, but I really kind of wanted. Come on, Photoshop. I've got to select some here. I was kind of just aiming more for this sort of thing, somewhere in here, and maybe even maybe even tighter. But because I didn't have appropriate lenses, I couldn't just make that type of image. But if I had had a 110, then I could have gone bank, 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 bank. Maybe I would have done 9 or 15 frames and captured this at very high resolution. But be very careful if you're shooting into the sun as I was here, because as we saw, there was some kind of flare, even though I shaded the lens. So I think the lens itself must have some internal flare, and that's kind of a bummer. All right, well, that's how you make a panorama. There are other concerns with how you actually shoot it, but that's not the subject for this video.